Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. My name is Kent Trammell, and we have Jonathan Lampel. He is with us today as well. Um, Say hello, Jonathan. Be polite. Just kidding. I'm going good. So last week I was not here. I unfortunately had to leave Lampel to do this by himself, which he did a great job as far as I can tell. So thank you for doing that, Lampel. Glad to be back with you today. And yeah, so it's the fourth episode of the May critiques, and by the way, I do have a fan going because it's a little warm in my office. If that becomes an issue, if you can hear that, let me know, and I will sweat for you and turn it off. But otherwise, yeah, welcome. I've seen several people in the chat so far that are being critiqued today. We've got 8 submissions to look through, which is double our normal 4 because between last week we had like a bunch of submissions. So it's going to be a little bit faster paced today, but a lot of good stuff to go over. So thanks for those submissions. Should make for a lot of fun. Let's see. William, where were you? Oh, I hope you're recording your next course. Well, I was actually on vacation with family, my side of the family, and then in another month I'll be on another vacation with my wife's side of the family. So we just go to the beach around here, and I relax in the sand and had good family time. So that's what I was doing. But good to be back and at work at the grind, at the CG Cookie grind. So thanks for asking, but I see you're disappointed by that. Oh, yeah. All right, cool. So we'll just get right into the critiques then, because again, we do have a lot. And the first one is from Ellen's Anima, I believe is how you'd pronounce that. Ellen's Sanima. But anyway, I just interacted with you on Twitter a few, maybe an hour ago or so. So hello, I think you're also in the chat. But we're looking at your stone brazier. How do you pronounce that? Do you know, Lampel? Brazier? I've never heard of that. Brazier? I feel like when I see IER, it's often silent, but I don't know. Anyway, we're looking at your stone altar or incense burner, whatever it's called, and brazier maybe, as William is suggesting in the chat. Either way, so it's clear it's a stone object that no sound for you, Lampel. Why would that be? I can hear you. Yeah, why is that? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, say something now.
Better?
Better. Okay, there. Sorry, I had an issue, technical issue, but we should be able to hear him now. And sorry about that. So far, I think he's just said hello, and he's not quite sure how to pronounce brazier either.
Yeah, nothing. Didn't miss anything too valuable here.
While I'm at it, I kind of need to move you over, but I'm not going to worry about it. Awesome. So
I can scoot my seat.
Oh yeah, that's perfect right there. If you can, that's perfect.
All right.
So we're looking at your stone thing that is clearly used to burn some sort of something, and one of the first notes that I have is that it's very clear to me that the texture is tileable. Like it's the same image that's being kind of repeated and wrapped around the whole thing. So it looks very consistent, and also the resolution is a little bit low. So like it just reads as a CG type thing rather than if you're going for realism, which by the way, I need to get in the habit of reading your context. So let me do that before I go any further. You had made this little piece for a large scene and would love some critique on it. It's a brazier made of stone. The inside bowl is covered in ashes and soot, and the entire thing is aimed for realism. The more realistic, the better, basically. In my opinion, it looks good, but not enough, and maybe you've got some additional things for me. There is no HDR environment lighting, just a sun, and being an amateur that I am, I tried to set up additional 2 lighting sources as key and backlight. Awesome. And so, yeah, if you're going for realism, in my opinion, one of the quickest things that breaks down a realistic render is texture resolution being too small, textures looking blurry, and just breaking down based on the image resolution. And that qualifies in this image, in my opinion. It also looks like maybe the texel density is slightly different depending on the piece. Like the bowl here in the main bowl looks like the texture is a little bit. What am I trying to say? It's lower resolution there than it is on the side. Like this part right here is the only specular evidence that I can see here and here, I guess. And that looks like it's got enough detail in the texture, but not here in the main bowl. And so that's one thing that I think gives it away as a CG image and breaks down the realism. Another one is that you've got a couple black spots like right here. I know that there's ashes and soot, and that's usually like a gradual type of cover, like grime, but like we've got a very harsh line right here, and I'm not sure what's causing that. Also, there's a very black, like this whole face in the geometry is black, so it's a very harsh edge, and that cuts it off, and it doesn't make sense necessarily why it's like that. You've got a good gradient going around the rest of the bowl, but just right here it looks like there's kind of an issue. And then another thing is there's really crisp transitions in between the different pieces of the bowl. Like right here is a big one. I'm not sure what's causing this super black line. It almost looks like it's a texture bake that is expanded beyond its borders a little bit. And so I don't really know what's causing that exactly, but it's breaking down the effect of this being like a stone structure that's been chiseled out of solid stone.
It could be like an ambient occlusion bake or something.
There you go.
Because if it is that sharp corner, then it would bake very dark at those areas.
Oh, so it's like baking the low res geometry, but we're rendering the high res, so it's like smoothing. Is that what you think is happening?
I don't think so. I think it's just, I don't know.
Okay. She's saying it's actually a very thin gap between those parts. So maybe that's part of it, is that the actual geometry is really crisp, very low polygon, so you have really sharp edges on that part. And like if it's made out of stone, obviously they're not going to be able to chisel that perfectly. So like that's kind of giving a bad effect. Okay, there's a gap between. So I would try. I'm curious how. I wonder if you're using a Boolean or something, because it looks like you're using a subsurf smooth modifier to get nice soft edges, but like why is that so crisp? I'm curious.
I think in this case, I mean, I've gotten some questions before on like what objects you should combine together and which ones are okay to just poke through each other. But in this case, since it is supposed to be all one carving, then I think connecting all of it as one watertight mesh would really help.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
Particular instance, because when you do that subdivision surface or like displacement or anything, then what happens on those corners is important, like Kent mentioned.
Right. Okay, so you're not using a subsurf, as you mentioned in the chat. You're using just a bevel. And so I guess you probably beveled most of the edges, but not that one. So maybe a bevel on just those edges would help. If you want to keep it a gap, I'm not sure how exactly this thing would have been structured, but I imagine it would be difficult to build, like, to chisel out a square, like, channel through this big stone. I don't know if that seems like maybe this would be one solid piece like Lampel was talking about, but I don't know, kind of getting deep into the how would they have built this in real life. Maybe another general note is to me this reads overly diffuse. So Lampel, I'm curious about your opinion on this. In my opinion, if something is pure diffuse, it looks bad with just a texture on it, right? Because you don't have a bump map to like really give you much in a diffuse to break up, to get kind of cheat detail. And so like often I feel like if it's pure diffuse or mostly diffuse, you really need like surface detail to help, even if it's a subtle displacement map, like something to give the light more to play with. Does that make sense to you? Is that a fair note?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like you mentioned before, like I can see some specular.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more in terms of maybe just lighting or getting the light to play across that surface.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're not using an environment map, and I'm curious why not, because I think that would, what I love about environment maps is if I have a specular element, like the environment is going to make that apparent, whereas just a few lights in a gray scene is not going to give you much to light. And in reality, when are we ever in this situation? When are you in a pure gray room with just a couple light sources and no other fill sources? You know, like that's a super rare situation. It's hard to block out literally all light except some bulbs. So that I think people do that, set that up commonly in computer graphics, and it immediately hurts a realistic effort. Whereas like an environment map quickly gets you to a more realistic effort. So I would recommend definitely going with an environment HDRI if you can. And there are places you can get those for free. One of my favorite ones is, what's it called?
HDRI Haven.
Oh, that's a great one. Thank you. That's even better. HDRI Haven. I forget that this has been made open source, I think technically, or it's free. Now completely free. So good gracious to Greg Zoll. Awesome effort. I think he's being funded by, yes, Patreon. But anyway, go there. He makes awesome HDRIs and they're free. So check those out.
And those are ridiculously high quality too.
Yeah, really high resolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And way more stops than you can find pretty much anywhere.
Oh, man, I need to get into it. I need to get into it way more.
Well, because that's the most important part when it comes to HDRs.
Yeah.
Is like what the dynamic range is.
Definitely. I guess that makes sense because I got them from openfootage.net. That's where I get them. I have gotten them from in the past. And
okay.
And like I think the stops must be different depending on who submits it. Number one, it's free, so maybe they're not putting a ton of effort into it. But like, anyway, like some images, I always have to change the value of the lighting to get like, I don't know, it to look consistent between different HDRIs. Anyway, I think HDRI Haven is the best place to go. Cool. All right, so those are the notes that I had on your brazier. Do you have anything else, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I had a couple notes on this one.
Okay.
Because it seems like the texture is like a lot of small detail, and then the shapes are very large, blocky details.
Good call.
So just some mid-sized detail would go a long way. And I think I looked up other versions of this and see like what other artists made or like what these looked like in real life. It seemed like a lot of them had carvings and stuff around the outside, which could help a lot. So you could either like inset some areas and then use curves to like trace patterns around it, or you could add a multi-resolution modifier and just start sculpting away.
Oh yeah,
I think that would help a lot.
Absolutely. I was gonna add that note, like something similar, but then I'm imagining like this shape when it's fresh off of the chisel platform or whatever that, like ancient people would have made this. Like it would have been very diffuse and it would have been very like perfect, So like my note would be like, if it doesn't look real, like add some mess up, some imperfection, some like cracks in the stone or some edges that have been chiseled off and like something hit it and broken pieces off of it. Like that's what's going to get to realism. But then I didn't put that note because I guess what if it's like fresh off the press, so to speak?
Could be. But even if it's fresh, it'd still have some carvings.
Yeah, you're right. You'd see
ornamentation. Like if they spent this much time building it, like that would take forever to carve.
That's a good point.
They'd put some other stuff in it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I respect that. Yeah. I think that's a good note. Awesome. Well, we'll move on then to the next one, which is...
Well, I guess while you're doing that, Carolyn asked, is resolution important when using HDRI? And the answer is yes, but mostly for reflections. So the amount of like the quality of the light that you're getting in terms of your shadows and what all that's about, that's going to be how many stops it is, or how much dynamic range. And then resolution is just for quality of reflections.
Oh, I didn't know that exactly. Thank you. So what do you typically use? Like what resolution do you go to when you're using HDRI for like a high quality render?
I mean, it depends on if I'm actually like looking at it in the render, like if it's part of the background, or if I have something that's like super shiny and almost zero roughness, then probably 8K or up. But if it's something that's like fairly rough, whatever, then something lower is fine.
Yeah. Man,
4K.
I need to upgrade my HDRI usage. I don't know if I've ever rendered that big, but that could probably be a problem with my renders. So thank you.
Well, I mean, it depends on the project. You don't always need it.
True. I love reflections, though. I always have reflections. I need them to look the best. All right, cool. So speaking of reflections, we're looking at Thor's hammer now from Gelson Rivera. And man, so this thing looks really good, and you provided several renders for us, so I appreciate that. Um, we'll look at, yeah, we'll start with this one. Yeah, I mean, it looks really good. You're doing a lot of good things with it. You've clearly you're using an HDRI. I would guess that's an HDRI image, and this right away ratchets up the realism compared to like the one we just looked at, the bowl, the stone bowl. And so, yeah, definitely if you're going for realism, use that HDRI like we see here. And you've got really nice reflective quality. I'm not super familiar with Thor's hammer. I haven't been watching the Avengers movies. Have you seen them by chance, Lampel?
I haven't watched the newest Thor, but I did watch the newest Avengers.
You did. Okay. So is his hammer like really really shiny, like this?
Um, I think so. Well, it's hard to remember because he
Okay.
actually had like a different weapon most of the movie.
Oh, okay. I
But I think it's
Yeah,
fairly
okay.
shiny.
I think the impression that I get from the metal is that it's really really machined. You know, like the edges are incredibly sharp, and which maybe that's the style of hammer that he has. But then I see the metallic shader has some significant breakup in the reflection. You know, breakup in the roughness value. Some is very clear reflection. Some is very rough reflection, and that looks awesome. I really recommend that for metallic surfaces. But there's a disconnect because the shape is so precise that you would see. I feel like you would see something with a metallic surface with that much breakup in the surface would reflect in the geometry a bit. Like the edges would be a little rougher or dented. You know, if he's swatting baddies with this thing, like maybe it's gonna dent it. I don't know. Maybe there's lore that like folklore about this thing that it can't be dented. I don't know. I'm getting maybe out there, but if you're going for realism, like I think there's a disconnect between the perfect geometry and the imperfect metallic reflection, I think is what I'm trying to say. So it looks like a low poly model with really high resolution, high quality rendering. So there's a bit of a disconnect in my opinion. Let's see what else. I love the design you put in here. I'm curious if that's modeled or if that's like a displacement, because I wouldn't guess displacement because that would probably mess up the edges.
It looks pretty modeled, I think.
Wow, if you modeled all that, that's intense. But because it looks also built into the model, like it's not. Well, maybe it is just a different mesh that's been intersected. Either way, I love the detail that you have in this etching, is what it ends up looking like. By the way, Jelson, are you here? I haven't seen you say anything. Maybe you're not here. But anyway, let's see. Some of the other. The worn metal shader is caught between too much wear and not enough. The edges are perfectly unworn, but actually the first thing to get worn. So yeah, that was my way of saying kind of what I've already said. That I feel like the edges especially need some form of wear and tear, whether it's a concentration of like rougher reflection values, like the edges have been scraped, and so that makes it less shiny. Something to draw attention to that, to emphasize the edges of the weapon, I guess, is a big thing for me. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of my biggest note was that disconnect. What about
I
you?
think, yeah, that's pretty spot on. I was thinking about something similar, but in a different way. And like the scratches or like the wear doesn't seem to match the use,
Hmm.
where it's like, the flat side is the same as the front, where
True.
you'd have
That's a
more
good
like impact stuff. And instead of it being scratched in one direction, it would be kind of spread outwards
Oh yeah,
as it like slips along stuff. But
that's a great note.
even then it would, yeah, you'd have like a lot of roughness variation in the middle and then around the edges, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that to me, it would click as a critique. Like to think about how this would be used, what would get the most wear, and yeah, certainly the impact area would have a lot of scratches. Your most the concentration of wear, and so
Yeah, and you can look up pictures of shiny hammers and just see
let's do
what
that.
the front of it looks like.
Let's see. Used hammer. Oh yeah. Oh, interesting. So I'm seeing like a coloration. This is a very old used hammer that I'm looking at right now, but it's like a more silvery metallic on the front where it gets used the most, and then everywhere else that doesn't get hit, it kind of starts to rust and discolor. So that's kind of interesting. Not that Thor's hammer is super old or you want to show it being old, but yeah, in this example, right, this hammer, like you can see how the edges are a little. Actually, it's like they're like highlighted this hard edge here. So that's the kind of thing that would be look good on your hammer, on the Thor's hammer. But yeah, that's a really, really good note. I'm glad you said that, because it'll make you think about, rather than just putting a procedural texture over it or have all the surfaces look the same, there'll be a little more thought to how this would be used. I think that's a very good note.
Yeah, I think that would help.
Forge.
And I guess adding on to what you said before, while you're still looking at that, that the edges are too sharp.
Yeah.
That really struck me on the handle most of all, where it just seems really uncomfortable to hold.
Oh yeah, really sharp edges.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair note. Like, if it'd be cool if you had, like, looking at this handle right now, if the leather portions, like they're straight up and down in between the metal rings, but then as it approaches the metal rings, the leather kind of curves up to meet the edge. Like,
Ooh, yeah.
that would be a good way to transition between those two surfaces. Thor's hammer doesn't take any damage. Yeah, I figured. I mean, I know that was probably part of the lore. So then we could get down this big rabbit hole about, like, well, it should always look perfectly chrome, or never show any wear. But then it's like, that's a disconnect. It'll never feel real if it's like that.
Yeah, because otherwise, it would just be 100% mirror.
I mean, that'd be a fun rabbit hole to go down. But anyway, all right, I think that's about it. Overall, like, that's the only real note. That can be condensed down into one note essentially, and overall, like, I mean, it's really looking good. Especially this image, I think, looks the best. It's on your black background, but the lighting is working really well for you. So, good job, good stuff.
It's a sweet render.
Yeah. Next, we got an animation from. Wait a minute, I missed the name. John Sanderson. For some reason, the video jumps in ahead of the text. From John Sanderson, this is an animated map project that he did. Let's read about your context. I gotta remember to do that. Where is it? Okay, that's Thor's hammer. Oh, okay. So I really wanted to participate in this. Currently working on a project. Let me see. We both big Zelda fans, and I made a map of part of the overworld and made a quick video to get some experience playing around with the VSE. It's pretty basic in the modeling end, but I would love whatever feedback you can give. So based on that context, it sounds like this was kind of a spur of the moment project that kind of came out of nowhere, quote unquote, but actually it looks like Facebook asking for project ideas. So it seems like part of your purpose was to mess around with the VSE with that in mind. And I think you said you were not going for realism. Oh, yeah, I did ask for more context. Hold on a second. I knew there was more context to this. Okay, I wasn't striving for realism, but I definitely had movie map scenes like Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones, etc. in mind, and alluded to the travel by map joke from the new Muppets film, which I did not know about. It fell more into the practice fun realm. Okay. Awesome. Well, with that in mind, we won't be critiquing it as if this should be photorealistic or anything, but let's watch it first, now that we have some context in mind. Cool. Did you watch that one, Lampel? Sorry, I know you're not synced with me when I watch stuff.
Oh, yeah, I watched it.
Okay, cool.
Saw it earlier.
So what I love about this project, it reminds me of of when I was like at the peak of excitement for computer graphics and like just exploring everything I could do with it, and like these funny projects that I never would have thought of like just came out of nowhere. And one in particular was I built this Master Chief model because I was really into Halo at the time, and also weirdly for like a week I was into Michael Jackson music videos. So I made an animation of the Master Chief dancing to Smooth Criminal. Don't ask me why, but like it just came out of nowhere, and it's like it's teaching me animation, it's teaching me camera work. I have to light this thing, I have to render it. It taught me a bunch, but it was like a project that didn't have much context to the broader world, so to speak. And in a way, that's what this feels like. I don't mean that negative in any way, but like, there's a lot of context missing from this, so to speak. So it's just like a beautiful little practice thing as you described it. And so with that in mind, like one of the first notes I really had about it was that the camera moves are extremely bold and can be disorienting, potentially nauseating, but it's at least disconnected from reality. And that was something that I had to learn myself, was that like when you get a camera and you're not a cameraman, like you don't know anything about cameras in real life, which is my case, like I'm making the camera do all kinds of stuff, floating around, very Matrix style, like always orbiting and just doing things that are very, very difficult to do in reality. And the result is like disorientation for the viewer. And I got that a little bit with this project, particularly the scene about, where is it? It's when, no, it's not that scene. It's when you're following this scene right here. Like I'm kind of orbiting, breaking the 180-degree rule, just going all around it a little bit. And it's a little bit uncomfortable to watch, I guess. So with that in mind, as you do more of these projects, like my recommendation would be to learn a little bit about like real camera work and like how it's actually quite limited in what you can do. And that will help it, there's just a lot of theory about camera work that will make this stuff feel a little more relatable, I suppose. Let's see, what else did I have? One thing, the particles at the beginning, I couldn't tell if they were necessarily sparks or like confetti. They didn't have a distinct look to me. These right here, what I'm talking about. And when I pause it, it kind of looks like they're just cubes, kind of orbiting around in a particle-like fashion. So, I mean, I think that could be a really cool effect if you're going for like a fire, like this is a map that's laid out on a table by a roaring fire or something. Like that's very fantasy, Zelda, Lord of the Rings style. I would just make the particles a lot smaller, have more of a glow, and get more of that fiery effect. I would guess that's what you're going for, but I'm not sure. Oh, John Sanderson, you're here. Also, in my case, no camera background. Resources. Resources. So it's actually, I don't have a lot of resources about camera work, like off the top of my tongue, like check this website, check this website, check this website. But like, I love films. I love watching movies and stuff like that. And with that interest, you start, I go to like Vimeo, for example, and you can look up like cinematic techniques, and people will break down camera work. And like one that I think of is David Fincher, and how he really made me think differently about camera movements. And he moves the camera so little. If you watch his movies, he's one of my favorites. So if you watch it, it's a lot of perfectly still shots, or like camera moves that just slightly look from one character to the next. Like he's so simplistic with the way he uses the camera. And that is how I learned like, oh wow, I don't need to always make the camera orbit around in crazy ways. You can be very effective with small camera movement. Almost like more is less is more. So anyway, like just kind of think about cinematography. Like that's the word that you're going to look for. DP, director of photography, like start to look at those people's work, and that will inform you on how to make better decisions with camera in computer graphics. But
yeah, and when in doubt, slow it down a bit.
Oh yeah, true. That's a good point. You mean like maybe he could do that if you do a dramatic camera move, just do it slower, kind of an attitude.
Yeah, well, I mean, just in particular with this project, because I did get the same feeling, like, oh, this is a bit much.
But I mean, I went through that hardcore, even more than you. Like the first thing I was doing, gosh, that camera was crazy, and I didn't know why. I'm like, it should be working. Why am I sick all of a sudden? But anyway, okay, it looks like Phil, you posted a good. Oh wow, yeah, a good ultimate guide to camera shots. Awesome. I'm gonna check that out.
Sweet, nice.
Yeah, thanks for helping out. Any other notes? Let's see. Okay, yeah, the environment in the map unroll shot. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go back there because that was clearly a photograph to me. So if we hit play and watch after the intro slide. This might be a moot point, honestly, but you mentioned you weren't really going for photorealism, and since you're like, it's a Zelda map, like Zelda has never been photoreal, but then you have like this photograph of the environment in the background, which it's fine. I use photographs like we were talking HDRIs all the time, but maybe blur it, you know, like put some depth of field into the render so it blurs out the background. It just to me is clearly like, oh, that's a photograph. And as we orbit around, it's just a strange shot, you know, like it looks like the table doesn't have legs necessarily. And that it kind of breaks down, I guess, like the aesthetic. If you're going for an aesthetic, I couldn't make it out because the map doesn't look photoreal, the table doesn't look photoreal, but the photograph obviously does look photoreal.
Yeah, and if you do blur it out, and just to make it more subtle, you could darken it a bit and then use the light sources that you have in the scene, either like a flickering fire off screen plus the candle or something, kind of give more of that adventure-y planning mood.
Man, it's so annoying. This little Google Slides control thing like blocks the playhead for the YouTube video, and I can't like I can't put the timeline where I need it. Anyway, streamer. I got to learn to be a better streamer. Okay, so the table texture is a too low resolution for how close the camera flies by. If we go back and look, particularly towards the end, like we get really, really close to the table and very clearly the texture resolution breaks down and it looks CG. So even if you're going for a stylistic look, I don't think that's really ever the look people are going for, like when it just looks like pixelated, like blurred pixels kind of thing. So, you know, a higher texture resolution would be pretty helpful. And Matt, you're saying like the wood texture seems a little bit flat. I can tell that he's using it as a bump, but yeah, especially towards the beginning. Let's look at that again. Gotta figure out how to get that playhead working for me. Yeah, especially on the first shot, it does look very flat. Like it looks flat. Like there is a lot of clear texture grain, and usually when the grain is that pronounced, it means like there's cracks or there's like divots in the wood running in the direction of the grain. But this is like a perfectly flat table, so yeah, that's a disconnect as well. It should be maybe like a rough-hewn kind of, I think of like rustic furniture that looks like Vikings made it. Maybe it should look something more like that. But awesome. I think that's really all. And you know, this was a test for you. I assume this was very informational for you, like rolling out that scroll. Like, I mean, seeing that, I'm like, I'm not sure right offhand how I would accomplish that. So that must have been a problem-solving thing. That is a cool effect. Camera work and like also making the path animate. I thought that was a really cool thing. So hopefully you learned a lot as a test bed for doing an animated, you know, it's really short film kind of thing. So
totally
good work in that sense. Absolutely.
I think my last note's like aesthetically, if this was going to be taken even further, make into a shot. I think with the path, the material of the actual like dotted line could be something else, either like black and inky would work well, or also like glowing and thin would also work well.
Yeah.
This seems a little dull as it is.
Yeah, true.
Messing with that a little bit would help. And then maybe you could even make it come up from the map and then go back down wherever they land.
Like it follows a topography or something?
Yeah, sure. Or it just seems like it has like this hover that's completely consistent. But if it popped out from wherever they were going in, flew straight and then landed back in or something.
That's true. Now that you mention it, if you had kept that red color, in my opinion, but like it was part of the texture map, sorry, that's going to be confusing wording. It's part of the map's texture, like, and it wasn't hovering off the surface. In other words, it was just like something that should be static, like a painting of a map is actually
Oh yeah.
animated. In that way, I think the red color would make sense because on a painted map, like that's what it would probably be. But since you do have it hovering, I do agree with you, Lampel, that emphasizing that more with a glowy texture, the glowy shader, or something more pronounced would be a cool effect. Cool. Yeah, so William Miller, you can see the shadow that's giving it away, the hovering, yeah. Cool. We'll move on to the next one. Good work, John. Thanks for sharing that with us. And we'll move on to this Lindsay character from BitBlocks, and who apparently is also named Evan Bernard. So thank you for this stylized character render. I have a soft spot for them. So when I first saw it, like I was really impressed with the kind of style that you got out of it. I love the purple hair. I love the construction of the hair, how it's these... I did a tutorial that looks similar to this, so like, I don't know, I like that look. And I also like the backlight, the rim light, how it's very pleasantly illuminating, not so much her hair, but like the face, neck, and garment, the clothing that she's wearing, the top. Like that really emphasizes the shape really well and separates it from the dark background. So there's a lot of good in this. Really good work. So good stuff. 2 thumbs up for that, for the effort. There are some things that throw it off for me a little bit, and also you provided a sculpture, a clay version, so to speak. But the first thing that stood out to me is, as being someone that I like shaders a lot and like spending time with shaders, and especially skin shading, is the SSS component is pretty strong. It's getting it's more of a glow rather than a light bouncing effect. And that was, it looks really, really overblown to where her face is glowing rather than looking like skin. So that was the big note that I had. And then
It feels almost like hollow plastic when it's like that.
Yeah, you said plastic. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like a hollow plastic.
Yeah, totally. When you said that, it took me back to you ever seen the Christmas Story classic movie where he gets the leg lamp? The father gets the leg lamp. It reminded me of that plastic when you said that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, to your point for sure. There's a lack of eyelashes on her bottom eyelids, which which can be a common thing to leave out, but since you define them on the top so well, I think it kind of feels odd to not have them, like they were shaved off or something on the bottom. So I would put them on the bottom. In general, the bottom eyelashes are less dense or less thick, I guess. So like you would want to make them a little more subtle, but I think you should add them. It looks like an omission now rather than like an artistic choice, in my opinion. And then, the nostril crease. You can't see it so much here, but right here, this nostril crease, it looks etched rather than an organic crease. It looks like you just took a pin and just jabbed it and like scraped it. And so that's not really what our folds look like on our face, kind of thing. I don't know if I have to show that. I will happily show that if I need to. I'm not sure if you're here, BitBlocks, but anyway, I did what I wanted to go over with this SSS, the subsurface shading. I wanted to go over that in Blender just real quick because I think subsurface shading is one of the most complex, difficult things to get really, really correct. And just saying that it's glowing doesn't really help, So I wanted to jump over there and just quickly talk about it. So I'm using Suzanne here just to give a ballpark example of what you have. And so it's not really even like this. It's somewhere in this ballpark. So you've got this glow happening with the subsurface, almost like the light goes into the material, into the surface, and then multiplies its strength, which doesn't happen. And so the thing that you're missing, I don't know if you're using the principled shader. When I first set up this example, I used the principled shader, and it has subsurface built into the shader, but amazingly, it doesn't have a scale value, which is probably it's one of the two most important components of subsurface, and it doesn't have one. I didn't realize that till today. So that means the principled shader is out, in my opinion, for subsurface. What do you think? I see you have something to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so it's the principal shader is weird in that the subsurface amount kind of controls the scale. So when it's set to 0, the scale is 0, meaning that
So there's a
so it,
scale value built into the subsurface slider.
basically, but I still wouldn't use it for skin.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. So it is in there, but if I can't control it explicitly, that makes me very uncomfortable. Anyway, that to say, like, I wouldn't recommend, like you said, I wouldn't recommend using the principal shader for skin shading, for detailed skin shading. If you add a little bit of subsurface, it's probably great for that, just as an effect. But if you want to get it more correct, the scale value is going to be very important. And so the scale value, I have it at 0.5. I can't remember what the default is here, but I just tried to match more what you have. And so I'm going to decrease that significantly, and it's going to make the light not pass through as much through the object. And this is dependent on scale of the scene and all that stuff, but just know that really the principle is to go down at this point. So it's at 0.1, and this to me is not quite enough. Let's go to like 0.2. Okay, so it's starting to get it's still a little bit glowy in here, but in your image, it is mostly glowing like an orangey, mostly a red, honestly, like almost an orangey red pink, somewhere in there. And so with the subsurface, the next step, once you get the scale ballparked, we want to change these values in the radius. And this is 3 values representing R, G, and B, red, green, and blue. And so you can mix those to get a color that you want. Right now I've got 1 in red, 0.2 in green and blue, which means red is the strongest color, and that's why you're getting a red glow. Whereas, like, I think I like a green value at 0.8 and a blue value at like 0.6. No, that's not right. 0.5. This is different than what I had before. I swear I was using different values. Oh, okay. So I think one thing that I did also change at this point was I made your color. Well, it's not your color, but what I guesstimated your color to be. It's too much in this pink spectrum, so I want to go back to like more of an like a suntan in that direction. More of it, add a little bit more yellow in, basically. And so at this point, I'm massaging the radius values. Let's see, how about 0.5, 0.5? Okay. All right, we're getting closer. So I've got the red value at 1, green value at 0.6, blue value at 0.5. And we're getting more of that skin translucency, the human skin translucency range. Now, I still might make the scale like 0.15 and just massage that a little bit. But anyway, that's hopefully a quicker lesson. I think I'm really desynced in the stream. Can you still hear me, Lampel?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I think maybe the rendering is causing... Yeah, okay. Anyway, so hopefully that's helpful. The lessons maybe to take away is like decrease your scale value pretty significantly to not get that, to avoid the glowing effect. And then your skin radius, like massage those numbers to not be overly red. Incorporate more green and blue. But hopefully that was a lesson that was valuable.
That definitely looks more fleshy.
Yeah.
Don't you have a shader forge on skin? I feel like you do.
I don't think it made it to Shader Forge, but I did have a skin shading lesson. Let me see if I can find that real quick.
Yeah, I can't remember. So when you did that, wherever it is, did you do the whole like epidermal, subepidermal thing? I've seen that before, but I don't know whether that's just left over from old renderers that like had to do that in order to appear realistic, or is that still like an applicable thing?
Man, where did I put that? Does anyone know? That's so. We have so much content over the years. Like I forget where I put things, but
Carolyn says pancake hobo.
Okay, I did do it a little bit there, but that's not the one you're thinking of.
One that was like specifically on it.
I wonder if that's archived. Might make its way to YouTube. I'm not seeing it on our site. But yeah, so when I first got really into subsurface, I did separate it into the 3 layers: your backscatter, your subdermal, and then your epidermal. And I think that's probably the most accurate way to go about it, most scientific way to get the right look. But I found myself for years tweaking all 3 layers, and it never got better than if I just had the layer now, where you have the subsurface color and then you change the radius value. So I've gotten good, like my best results with both methods. Does that make sense? So since then, I don't really go into the 3 layers because it's a time suck, and I'm less sure of which layers to change. I don't know if that makes enough sense, but it gets very complex very quickly when you break it into 3 layers. Anyway, and for a stylistic character especially, I don't think you need to go into 3 layers. You just need more of a general skin subsurface. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. But awesome. Let's go on to the next one. The Ruined Tower by Jeremy Puyot. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but I imagine it's French. But Jeremy, we're just going to call you Jeremy. So you got this really interesting tower artwork, and I call it artwork because it doesn't seem like a technical render, like a study. I'm doing a study of lighting or caustics or something, and it's kind of scientific. Like, this looks like you're saying something with your art by having this tower partially constructing itself or deconstructing itself. I'm not entirely sure, but you got this interesting artwork, very tall in form, in like the format. And so it's pretty cool. I really like the sort of golden hour-esque lighting that you have going on. It's very consistent with the background image, and I think it's really cool. Let's see, I've been talking a lot, I feel like, to start off. Do you want to go first with this one, Lampel? Do you have anything?
Yeah, sure. I think for this one, well, one of the notes that I think you had as well is that the shadows are like really dark for there being a purplish atmosphere. And it seems like there should be a little bit more either like bounce lighting or environment lighting going on.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that. Like talked about earlier, an HDR would certainly help.
Right, which it seems like you're using one, or you have an environment. Maybe it's just an image to serve as a background and not an HDRI, but...
Yeah, I think that could be it.
Yeah, that confused me too, because it looked like you had the stuff set up to influence a fill light for those dark areas.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the only other 2 major notes that I had was, one, the camera's like looking down a bit, but we don't really see anything below, and so it just looks empty and like there's nothing there, which seems a bit weird. So either add more stuff or tilt the camera up a little bit so you're looking at more of the sky, and that way you don't have to do all that work.
Yeah, I like that. So Jeremy, you do say that you said in the chat that it's an image in the background, not an HDRI. So that to me is great. Like, you're intentionally using an image that you want to be seen in the render, not just to show the HDRI. But what I would do, go ahead. What were you gonna say, Lampel?
I was gonna say, it is a good image.
Yeah, totally. I love the atmosphere that brings, the time of day. What I would do is use an HDRI still and like color correct it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfectly match what you have, but like find a sky, something generic, and then color correct it to be that kind of purple to orange spectrum, and use that to influence the fill light. But you don't see the HDRI itself in the render. You keep that background image that you're already using. That's what I would recommend for getting that fill light. But yeah, okay, Brandon, you're saying the roof is pretty dark. You can't make out the material. That too, that's partially the lighting, but also maybe not entirely the lighting, because clearly the rocky surfaces are being illuminated by your sun lamp. But yeah, for some reason the roof is particularly dark. Sorry.
Yeah, it almost looks like a material thing.
Right, and it looks like there's a cone shape, maybe that is the roof base, but then you added shingles on top of it. But the roof base is this lighter brown color, and then the tiles are like really dark. So it just, yeah, it's a interesting effect. Maybe a little could be polished a little bit more.
I agree. I think the last thing that I had was, moving, it's in motion. So either if it is in motion, which would be kind of cool, you could add some motion blur or something. But if it's not, maybe add a few more bricks to give it more structure, and you could still have it obvious that it's, taken apart piece by piece, but give it enough connecting pieces to make it look like it's still standing still. More of a skeleton, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good note. But yeah, because I didn't know if it was deconstructing or constructing. But yeah, it's a little bit of motion blur, something that would go a long way. Yeah, I really like that note. Let's see, Jeremy, you said it's multiple tiles, but I've got problems with normals on them. Well, that would explain it. Yeah, if there's normal issues, that's definitely going to cause the darkening, and that's a pretty easy thing to solve. So if you're already on that, then good job. Another note that I had was that the fog stops pretty abruptly. Now I like the fog. I like a lot more and more. It seems like the atmosphere that a fog can do in a scene, even really subtly in like a smaller scale scene. And so I like the depth that it brings, but in your image, it cuts off really abruptly, kind of, a third the way up the image from the bottom. And it ends up feeling like a lot of games from like the 90s, like N64 games where to save frame rate or performance, like they put a lot of fog and stuff. And maybe that's a bad association, but it doesn't feel like realistic. It feels like a limitation. It just takes me immediately back to those old games, computer games, like fantasy games with those fog everywhere. So I would like, instead of ending it abruptly, like make it taper off in a more organic, noisy fashion. Not noisy, but like a cloudy kind of fashion.
Yeah, that would be really good. And if I can't tell if it seems like a post-processing thing.
Oh,
Maybe
true.
not. But if it is, yeah, you can take some cloud texture and kind of either like multiply it or do something
Bingo.
to break that up.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And also color it to be the same as the atmosphere, because I think it's
Oh,
not the same
nice.
color.
So like give it more of a pink hue.
Yeah, a little bit. Because like you
Nice.
can see in the background of the image, it kind of like fades to that one color, but that's different than the fog up close.
Oh, okay. So
So it should be similar.
Jeremy is saying that his computer has a hard time rendering volumes. Okay, yeah. So for this, if it does have a problem rendering volumes, this particular situation, I think it's overkill to do the volumetric rendering because you can easily get the same effect in an easier way if that was very redundant, but you can get the same effect using a depth pass like your Z buffer pass. And like use a cloud texture like Lampel said, multiply it over. That'll get you the same effect at much less cost to you and your computer.
Yeah, that should definitely help. And I think for some reason I could be wrong, but it seems like the Z depth pass is still not anti-aliased in cycles. So
Oh.
you can do a mist pass though.
Oh, okay. So
So
that's anti-aliased.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
But for some reason the default Z pass is not,
Okay.
which is weird. Yeah, use a mist pass and you should be fine.
Excellent. Good tip. Cool. Well, good stuff. I was very intrigued by this render. Whenever you posted it, I don't know. There's good stuff going on in it. So, one more thing. I forgot this note. Some of the cracks in the stones are noticeably repeated, in my opinion. Especially this form right here, this kind of upside down Y or maybe like an H shape. You see that popping up over and over right here, right there. So either the way you can solve this is either make the cracks less apparent, like right here, it's a more simplified crack shape, and that's not going to be as noticeably repeated. So make it less distinct, or do more stones with different varieties. So there's a couple ways to attack that, but if I'm really nitpicking it, and this is a nitpick, like breaking it down to that same shape, it might even be the same stone rotated around different ways, and so it'll go a long way to make a few different stones to break that up. Okay, it is only one cube, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really nitpicking. Just pushing it as far as I can, but anyway, good work, Jeremy, and we will go on to the next one. The Blender Eevee Astronaut. This one this one was pretty impressive when I saw it, and we'll watch through that. Let's see if they're. Man, I feel like every other one I remember to read the context. So, hope I'm not. Hope I'm not frustrating anybody by like not getting the context set. But okay, so Jacob, you're saying that this is a project I worked on for a while, and then the cycle's render time stopped your workflow, and then a few days ago you opened it in Blender 2.8, and it materialized with a lot of fun. Without that noise, I was able to see some of the flaws, but a critique would be amazing. I'm currently doing the realistic character creation course, and it's helpful. That is good to know. Well, we'll watch this before we say anything. Oh my, I've never seen that part. That was pretty awesome.
The very
Yeah,
end.
so that funny part at the end I've never seen is Jacob. I wonder if you're here. Really good work. I mean, this is one of the, I would say, one of the better Eevee renders I've seen to date. Like, so much detail going on, really working the lighting well, and yeah, just a lot of good stuff. Um, I think they just saw it too. Were you going to say something, Lampel? Did I interrupt you?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so overall, like this, again, I think is way more impressive than it is not impressive. So it puts, you've got a lot of skills that you're working on really, really well, and a lot of good to say about it. If we're going to get into the critique part of it, one of the first things, which is not first in the list, so I'll just start with the first in the list. The galvanized metal bump on the backpack in particular stuck out to me as being too simple and harkening again back to like old computer graphic days, like 90s video game renders. And if we look at, let's see if I can find it in the video. Oh man, I have got to change this. Hold on a second. I want to get access to this playhead. And let me change the video size. Okay, I think this will help me. All right, let's try this again. There we go. So right here, I noticed that it doesn't show up quite so well. Okay, there it does. But it looks like you're using a noise texture to get, or a Musgrave, something like that, to just basically give some procedural divots all the way across the texture, or the shader. And so, I don't know, it seemed very noticeable and less polished than it could be. I don't mean polished in terms of metallic, but like there could be multiple layers of noise or more subtle noise to achieve that effect. And so maybe a little more time spent on that could go a long way. But okay, I should also say that I'm kind of nitpicking like right from the start because this is a really, really good render. But what was the next one? I think the next it just looks like these metallic pieces were not as there wasn't as much time given to those pieces, which could be fine, except that you have this specific shot that showcases the top, and it just looks like a gray diffuse material. Like I don't see any real reflective metallic element to it, and maybe I just don't know what it is if it's not supposed to be metallic, but it's just gray and not really understandable what it is. So anyway, that was a note. Like if it is the same galvanized material, then add more metallic element to it, a bump map, like polish off the material a little bit more to bring it up to the same level as everything else, because you're setting the detail bar pretty high, and so like everything in your scene needs to like meet that bar.
You're about to say.
Okay.
Coming up.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, because you're going to talk about the like the sculpting and the glove and the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to expand that out to the rest of the suit, where like the wrinkles don't feel like big wrinkles. They kind of feel like lumps.
Yeah.
But I know that's a really hard effect to get.
True.
Like, I have trouble with that for sure.
True. Yeah. As far as the cloth sculpting, I would say it feels like 75% there. Like I get the effect that you're going for, but it doesn't read fully as like cloth, and there can just be a little bit more time spent on those shapes. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
I think some like deeper, sharp creases, probably in those valleys, would help a lot.
Yeah, everything kind of has the same level of wrinkle, like it's always the same depth, both in and out. So it just looks very consistent. Just looks like negatively, it can just look like a bunch of lines and not really thought out wrinkles. Like there's a thought process behind like how wrinkles are formed, kind of thing. But anyway, again, like I would say 75% there. You're really close, but that other 25% will just take it the next level. And then, okay, yeah, you mentioned the hands. That to me stuck out as being one of the most unappealing things, I guess, about the image. And it just doesn't feel like there's a hand in there. It feels kind of like do you ever do like wash dishes with those rubber gloves, the yellow rubber gloves? Sometimes they're purple. Do you know what I'm talking about, Lampel?
Yeah, like the elastic ones.
I don't know if it's elastic, but it's just like a little rubber.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, empty. Like there's no evidence of like if you had fingers in there, like you wouldn't get this the pinky just kind of like broken off in the wrong direction. Oh wait, like this. So the pinky just sort of like goes off like that, and that feels empty and broken if there is a hand in there. So like the hand shape in particular, the pose, I think there's a lot of. It's not very good, I guess. It could use a more anatomical correction. Yeah, and I think that was the best way I could think to describe it. Is it feels empty. It doesn't feel like there's a human hand underneath the surface, I guess.
Yeah. So would you go about that by sculpting a hand first, and then kind of inflating it, or what would your process be for that?
So I would actually sculpting fingers is a frustrating thing for me because it's so repetitive and clumsy. I would go into edit mode and like select, like go if you don't have it rigged, that would be number one. And I don't often have them rigged, so I'll go in and select, the verts that make up this portion of the finger, and then rotate it with the cursor at the joint. Rotate it down like this, go to this point, rotate it down, and then pose the hand, not like this, because like very, very rarely are poses like this kind of what you have, but like make it more natural, which often leaves the pinky kind of curled a little more, and then gradually less curled as we get to the pointer. Bring the thumb, let's see how to show this. Oh gosh, I'm not sure if you see this in the stream, but like bring the thumb down like this. That's way more natural. That is me like completely neutral, but you kind of have it up like this. So anyway, like just study your hand and mimic that. That's my best advice, because if you just leave your hand laying there, like it's going to feel much more natural. Or put it in a fist, something to make this guy feel more natural.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not a fist, because like he's wearing these like heavy space gloves, so that would take a lot of work to.
True. Let's look up some space gloves. Maybe there's a default pose for space gloves that I am ignorant to. Space.
Because they should be pretty fat, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely fat. That's a good point. But like this, for example, like it's very fat fingers, but it's still like a neutral pose. They're not like splayed out.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Wow, this is kind of an interesting search. I've never Googled this before. But yeah, a more natural hand pose I think will go a long way. That was just something that stuck out to me. That was the biggest thing that stuck out to me. And the last note I think I have is the face itself. How close do we get to the face? I think right. So the face is a little bit blank, a little zombie-ish, and part of it is I think the eyes are starting to encroach on the cross-eyed realm. And so like bringing the eyelids, this is gonna be funny.
Oh yeah, now that you said cross-eyed, I can't unsee that.
You know, it's more like this, and so just bring them apart, kind of thing. That's gonna help. Also, let's see. It's just so blank. I'm trying to think. A little bit of an expression helps.
Part of it's the frown. Like
Yeah, she kind of.
he's got a frown.
He or she, I'm not sure what it is, what the astronaut is, but yeah, it's a frown, kind of a sadness. So I would maybe neutralize that. I try it. It's hard for me to put words to it. I know that the face looks off, and the biggest thing is the eyes, the eye focus. So decross them, and then I don't know. Like if I get this feeling where it's like something's dead about this face, I just put like I choose either a slight smile or like a concentrated look. You know, like looking off into space or something. You know, like give it something to have a little more life. Especially for a presentation render like this, because you've clearly gone through a lot of effort to make camera moves, to light it really well, and then just to have like a blank face, you know, really hurts the final presentation. And it is very symmetrical.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I feel like with a character like this, just some sort of like slight smirk would go well, because it's not, too serious. It's not too happy. It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I am drawing some blanks to say like go with this type of pose, because like we have neutral faces that don't look so dead. So it's subtle changes that to just make it not look so dead, I guess.
Yeah. Another thing that I think would help is also the eyebrows. I noticed that they're extremely flat along the forehead, and they don't kind of curve around with the
That's true.
with the head.
Yeah.
And then messing with those also helps the expression.
Michal, you make a good point about the reflection in the eyes. We don't really see any reflection in the eyes, and that can do a lot for adding life to a 3D character. That the specular, like, I think there's something to do psychologically for us, like recognizing a wet eyeball. Like something about that feels like alive, I think. And also, with characters, you often hear people talk about the little strip of reflection that's like in between the eyelid and the eyeball, especially on the bottom. Like that's a common thing. Does that make sense to you, Lampel, if I just said that? You know what part I'm talking about?
Okay. Absolutely.
That's like next level, but a little bit of specular in reflection of the eyes will go a long way. I feel like there's something going on with William and his grammar.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it casual. We don't need to. This is a critique on artwork, not people's spelling. That doesn't really matter.
Oh man, grammar wars. Yeah, those are some of my fave. Awesome. All right, we'll go on. Jacob, really, really nice work. After we critique something like that, I feel like I got to come back and say, like, really nice work that you have going on with this. So keep
seriously. And like other people were mentioning in the chat, like the way you like presented it and like moved your camera and everything was top notch.
Yeah, really, really well done. Awesome. Next, we have a short movie development character and environment from Pascal. And I know that he had some context that I wanted to read. Let us see. And by the way, we did have a couple submissions that were from non-citizen members, like free members of CG Cookie. I don't mean to be rude by skipping those, but we do reserve these critiques for our citizen members, just to focus on them especially for their support. So that's what those are for. And no offense, but that's why I'm not. There were a couple that submitted that weren't citizens. So just FYI.
Otherwise, there's just not enough to get to them all.
Yeah, true. If we had all the free members submitting, we'd be here for years. But anyway, so thank you also, citizens, for supporting us and doing this thing with us. So there was some context. Where is that? Here we go. From Pascal. Okay, I was working on a trailer for my first short film. That's exciting. I'm not aiming for something photorealistic, but right now I'm focused on the environment and the lighting. I'd like to have your feedback on the way the environment looks and feels and the lighting of the scene. Uh-oh. I probably should have read that earlier. I had several notes. Most of my notes were on the character, and based on that, I get the impression maybe that's not what you're interested in. Uh-oh. Should I...
That's okay. I can talk about the environment.
Okay, all right, go for it, the environment.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing that strikes me about the environment is it reminds me a lot of, what was it called? Daily Dweebs.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, yeah.
And that's a good thing because that was a super cool short film. So, I mean, props for keeping up the style. But you said you're not going for realism, but everything in the environment looks like you're going for realism, except maybe the shapes in the fence. But even then, So yeah, I'm gonna have to think while you're talking about the character about ways to improve that, because it feels like it's supposed to be realistic, but it's not quite there. So it's in that in between, sort of uncanny-ish.
Agreed. I completely agree with that note. It's like you said, it's not meant to be realistic, but the grass to me looks borderline a photo. Like, it looks really good, very realistic, and it's like, oh, but it's not supposed to be. So I think the point of like a stylistic choice is to deviate further from reality. So like, make that grass super green, or make the blades, really fat by comparison to reality. Like, exaggerate the features, and then you'll start to get a more definitive style. Because I agree, like, that tire in the background, that looks photoreal to me, it's very close to photoreal. Most of this looks photoreal, aside from the fence, the fact that they're like, off-kilter, slanted from one another. Besides that, it looks, I would have guessed you were going for photorealism.
Well, that's a tough one too, because I think the fence is like perfect. I don't think I would change that too much.
I like the fence, yeah.
But just because even in recent Pixar movies and all that stuff, you wouldn't call that realistic. But all of their surfacing and texturing is very realistic, believable. I guess, or it's yeah, exactly, believable.
Yeah.
So I would have to say, like, it mostly has to do with the shape and less about the shader.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but I think making the grass blades either fatter or like droop down.
Yeah, that's
the tree strikes me as it could be. I guess you could exaggerate some of these movements. Like, the tree could be like twisted a bunch, or kind of have some sort of like lattice that give it a weird shape, or make it like put like a ball with the texture of leaves on it, and then put planes, like alpha mapped planes all around it to make it look really fluffy. Could work. That's more of like a game technique, but you could use that here.
I agree. I like this. If you go in the stylized realm, possibilities are endless. But if you go realistic, that is one thing. You're in a box with realism, and so it feels like you're closer to that box. And you bring up the Toy Story thing. In Toy Story 3, I believe there's this part where a trash truck picks up, like a garbage truck picks up something. I can't remember, and like it crushes it. Do you know the scene I'm talking about? I think Sid is driving that truck, or is like dancing to rock music and like banging on the anyway. I love that scene because the garbage truck looks so deliciously shaded and believable, and I love that scene for that reason. But if I'm honest, I wouldn't critique that positively for like the bigger picture of Toy Story. Like, I don't know why it had to be so realistic in that specific asset compared to like how stylized I feel like the toys are and the characters in the movie. So like, I guess that's a way to, I'm trying to say that my opinion, and this is opinion now, is if you're going for stylized, like you've got to exaggerate something about it. Whether you have realistic, maybe it's what you're saying. Like if you've got realistic shaders, make the shapes very exaggerated. But if you've got mostly realistic shaders, mostly realistic shapes, it's this uncanny space that I don't know what I'm looking at. You know what I mean? And maybe that's kind of what the environment looks like to me right now. That uncanny space. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's also your
mentioned
Go ahead.
colors.
Go ahead.
And making things like more saturated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part it's good, but yeah, maybe for the grass, something like that could be more exaggerated.
Well, let's look at. You mentioned the Daily Dweebs, and I really think that's a good comparison because as like a successful example of like a stylistic background. So let's look at that.
Yeah, let's look up some examples because that one was like overly stylized, but at the same time still was very believable in the background.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at some images right now, and like I think
I guess
saturation.
it's mostly blurred, but
Yeah, saturation does play a big role. Like the sun is really orange and the shadows are really, really purple. But like, and I think the grass isn't maybe that far from yours. But yeah, that just pushing those exaggerated colors a little bit takes it a long way. And the background's also not the focus, so maybe that's something you can. Did you just say you can blur it out a bit more?
oh, I just said the Daily Dweebs is blurred, so we
Yeah.
can't like see it as
True,
clearly.
we're not focused on it, but anyway, yeah, if you're going for stylized, I say own it and really like determine a style. Maybe right now it doesn't feel like you're committing to a stylized look, apart from the character. So I know maybe you didn't ask for this, but I did have some notes on the character and some people in chat. You've been talking about the character as well, but so like one of the biggest things is the facial. Okay, first I'm going to say that the body shape is somewhere between a human in a costume and a bird. And someone else mentioned that it does feel like this could be like a baseball team or a sport team mascot. With like a human with human proportions being in there. But then you see that the legs are so skinny that a human leg could never fit in there. And I don't think that's the look you're going for, a person in a costume, but that's kind of the vibe I'm getting. And if I'm going to assume that you're not explicitly going for that direction, because there's something kind of uncanny, that's the word of the day apparently, but like uncomfortable about that look. And so I would assume you're not going to go for that, but like the arms in particular, they don't read like wings, like hardly at all. And I don't know if you're here, Pascal, to like not defend yourself, but like present information that I'm not aware of. But like the arms, especially if you were going for a bird, a stylized bird-like character, it's not reading like a wing at all. It's reading like a costume. And so in that way, I think there's a lot to be done for the character. And I brought up, I went and looked for some stylized bird characters. And personally, my favorite here is this example, where they're pushing the features of the bird, but it still feels very animal, very bird-like. And there's also a really nice expression being limited by the bird features. So like, I love this one right here. But there's a realm of... there's a spectrum of type of bird-like characters. Tweety bird would be a good one, to get some like for sure successful stylized bird, reference. Like Tweety bird would be good. The Angry Birds, I think that would be something to look at. This seems more in the style where it's kind of looks like a person in a human in a costume, but not uncomfortably so. So anyway, I just wanted to provide some optional things to look out for. But it brings me back to the face of the character, and it's this element of being blank, in my opinion, like staring through you kind of a way in an uncomfortable sense. And, like the eyes can be, there's a lot to be said about that. So like let's see here. One thing about Tweety Bird right here, even though it's basically a round shape, this little, the cheek as it eclipses the bottom of the eye, that really adds like a happy, friendly vibe to the expression. And here it's just a pure circle, and so it looks like eyes popping out of the head, kind of a vibe. Not very comfortable, not very friendly. And I think just to add a subtle expression, study some of these characters' expressions, and add that into your character. That would help a lot. But I don't know. You didn't ask for character critique, so maybe you're aware of this stuff. Yeah. Okay. Omar, you're saying that it seems that the eyes being so wide open. I agree with that. Very rarely do we see an expression other than like surprise where it's like eyes wide open. There's usually some element of the eyelids playing a role in that expression. Let's see. Another thing I had was the beak and legs feel untextured by comparison. Like you've got all this really fine furry feather detail all over the body that provides very high frequency detail. And then by comparison, the beak, the orange beak, and the tongue and the feet, or the talons, I guess, they are just like solid orange, solid colors, solid orange and solid reddish pink. So that's a big contrast in the detail level, and I would recommend upping the detail in the character's beak and feet. And then also, yeah, so going back to the fur/feather look, I think it's working for you, especially I've seen this before where, like you create a feather system out of like strands of hair, and that can work pretty cool. It can be a definitive style. Right now, I feel like it's somewhere in between where like on the chest and torso and legs and a little bit on the forehead, like you've clumped together the hair particles to look like feathers, but then the majority of the rest of the body is just like an animal fur, and so it again doesn't feel completely bird-like, I guess, to me. What do you think, Lampel? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes it look like a costume.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, is that it's very fuzzy.
Yeah, fuzzy. Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, like I know it's kind of a lot of work to make a good fur system, and on that note, like you've done a lot of good job with your fur system, just in a technical sense, like the render quality and the fine like the very fine fur effect. Anyway, so like good stuff. I hope that wasn't out of place to critique the character after I realized after the fact you weren't asking for it, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, some reference again, and I think we're coming down to so this is the last one. The Chalice of St. John the Baptist by Finis Octavian. And so I had to look up the Chalice of St. John the Baptist by, you gave context. It's a famous painting, or it's a painting at least. One of my first renders modeled after Hans Memling's Chalice of St. John the Baptist. So I had to look this up, and when we do, we get the painting itself. So right here, it looks exactly like your render pretty much, with a snake crawling in the gold chalice. So here's a comparison of the two. Obviously, I don't think you're going for a 1-to-1, which I respect. But you have you're getting the same effect across. You're even matching the lighting quite well. Yeah, quite well actually. If I were to, one of the first things that come to mind looking at comparing these two, not that you're going for a 1-to-1, but what I like in the original is that the metal is a very worn, kind of handmade looking surface, whereas your gold is kind of like a perfect mirror reflection, and that's just, I think it's not very common in reality and not very appealing in reality to have a perfect gold like that. It's kind of gaudy, whereas like over here the worn gold, it's not quite gaudy. It looks elegant, or it looks valuable, but it doesn't look gaudy, so I really like the breakup, the roughness value, increasing that roughness value to make it less mirror finish, and also adding a texture in there to break it up, to give a variety to the roughness values. So that was the first thing that my eye was drawn to, was just doing a little more to get closer to that original in terms of that gold.
I think that would go a long way.
Cool. Well, there's no snake too. I just kind of realized that. I don't know if you're trying to match that exactly.
Needs a snake.
Yeah. But one thing that I wondered when I saw the painting, I was like, oh, one note that I wanted to give you was to add more grime to the wall. You know, that's kind of like a default thing that I go to is like, if it doesn't look realistic 100%, like it's probably some grime element that's missing. But there's actually not much grime on the wall, I don't think. But there is a much higher frequency surface quality to the wall compared to the texture. So this is a note that I feel like I give a lot, is that the texture resolution looks lower than it should be. And if in the painting, there's just a lot of these really, really fine like cracks and little bits of the wall like missing, little divots and things like that. And I think that really helps to break up the monotony of the surface. Like you can see a concentration up here, right there. It's hard not to say other than just right there. But like something to mimic that, I think would go a long way. Right now, your wall looks a little too bland, I think, by comparison. But yeah, that was kind of a couple notes I had. Anything else? I did say, like in my notes, I did say like everything is pristine and a touch of grime, dust, grit, scratches. I really do like dust when you add dust to like crevices, both in the chalice and in the wall in general. Like dust is naturally going to gather there, and so like adding a dust element can help, even a subtle one.
Specifically for stuff that's been sitting there for ages, as I would imagine this would be.
That would be my guess too. But like now that I'm zoomed in a little bit to the chalice, like there's these beautiful scratches and like really fine metal worn detail that would go so far for your 3D recreation. But
yeah, it's crazy to think that even in this old painting, he was thinking about edge wear.
Yeah. No, yeah, seriously. It's inspirational to look back at them, and especially when they like got into the realism paintings and they were like nailing that stuff on the head. Like just imagine how much observation they were doing of real life, like, and what an education that would have been. It makes me like respect what we do, just like really getting into what's happening in reality, why stuff is the way it is, and how to recreate those effects. It's a fun pastime, a fun thing. But okay, I think that's all that I had. Yeah, so that's the end of the critiques today. Do you have anything else left to say on that one particularly?
Sure, I could go for a few.
Okay, cool.
I think one is the one in the painting has a bit more detail, and so I know it's going to be a little bit tricky to model, but adding in more of those details, especially around the little bulb part in the middle, I don't know what to call that.
I think where the jewels are.
Yeah, like that has a lot of detail in the painting, and then it's very simple in the render. Also, it's different proportions. It needs to be like stretched out a bit.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But and then the kind of like inset and dots around the bottom.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Would go a really long way, especially when you go and make those changes to the material, and then add in some of that edge wear.
Yeah, good point. Really good points. I'm guessing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, very last thing, bump up the lighting, especially on the wall, make it much brighter, and I think that would really help. And try to, even if you don't have to match the painting perfectly, try to match the lightness
values.
Or try to match the value a bit better.
That's a really good call. Could be some more contrast in the shadows and the illuminated bits. Yeah, that's a good note. Yeah, that's really good. I didn't even notice really that, like the details missing, the little dots around the base of the chalice, the cool little intricate Baroque style details between the jewels. Yeah, that would really be going the extra mile.
Sells it is that like sense of scale that you get from those small things.
For sure. And you might not be going for a 1-to-1, but it would be pretty cool if you got close. So yeah, I don't know. That'd be cool if you wanted to do that. But let's see. Who is this? Okay, yeah, I don't think Finis Octavian is here right now, but good work overall. Like it seems like I would guess that this is a work in progress that you could take it a little further and like really wow people with it. So yeah, good stuff, man.
Totally. It makes me realize, looking at it now, how interesting of a perspective it is in the painting, where I don't even know how I would get that. Is it just like a really low focal length? Because look at how you can see the entire inset into the wall
I
on both sides.
so I think it's incorrect physically.
It would, I feel like it has to be, or it's because if it was a really low focal length, the cup would stretch out more.
Right. I think it's isn't it single point perspective? Like if you traced the lines of like the bottom of the inset, the harsh lines, I think it would all
Oh,
go
yeah.
into one point. And one point
Yeah, you're right.
perspective is like physically incorrect, I think, due to the way our eyes see or whatever. Um,
But it's so pleasing to look at.
yeah, it's very symmetrical. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Like it would be a pretty cool render if you got close to it. That'd be neat. A good way to pay homage to whoever it is that painted this, Hans Memling. But cool. Well, I
That's a
think
cool idea. I like the idea of trying to recreate a painting as like practice.
yeah, totally.
Great idea.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I was doing a personal. We had a lull at one of the studios I worked at, and so we were just like doing personal projects to like stay busy. And one of my bosses, my like supervisors, he saw me doing a match of an artwork, and it was like really close, but it wasn't perfect. And he challenged me. He was like, "Copy it exactly. Just go through that as an exercise, and you'll develop a lot more respect for the original artwork, but also." It will just be that much more authentic. And I even made a tutorial about like authentic translation from 2D to 3D. And it is a really cool exercise. Like it teaches you a lot, and it would be worth trying if Octavian you wanted to do this with this particular image.
That'd be
But
sweet.
yeah, if the perspective is if physically incorrect, it'd be interesting to see how you could try and solve that. Like it might involve like warping stuff to make it render correctly but be physically incorrect. But anyway, that now we're just kind of I'm just talking out of my rear end. But I think that's going to be all. We've kept you for an hour and a half. We have another at least 8 submissions for that are left in the thread. So we added another critique stream for this Thursday. So day after tomorrow, we're going to do this again at the same time and finish off those submissions. I'm not sure why a bunch came in the last week, but we're going to try and hit all of those for you. So thanks for being here. Lampel, always a pleasure, sir. I learn stuff. I learn new stuff every time you critique. So thank
Well,
you.
sweet.
Awesome.
Should be fun. One more for the month.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then, so we'll see you hopefully on Thursday. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good rest of your Tuesday.